Welcome to Hey, Great Shot. This is the Great Shot Podcast, a Cracked Racquets and Tennis Channel Podcast Network production. My name is Alex Gruskin. On tonight's show, we've got another edition of The Deciding Point, our weekly breakdown of everything that happens across the Division I college tennis world. Of course, here on Tuesday nights on our Cracked Racquets YouTube channel, we break down all of the Division I women's action. And folks, there's only one storyline all of us are focused on as we approach the ending of this 2023 season. What is the NCAA tournament field going to look like? Yes, we still have regular season conference titles to wrap up. We still have postseason conference play ahead as well. But at this point, we're all wondering, who are the top 8 seeds? Who are the top 16 seeds? Who are the teams we need to be ready to see have a fantastic month of May and thrive in the 2023 NCAA tournament? That is the question we are going to be focusing on throughout the course of these shows headed towards the NCAA tournament. Of course, we're still going to recap all the major results, and we've got plenty to discuss from the course of the past weekend. Everything NC State's done over the past week. Oklahoma on a hard charge towards the top 16. You have madness out west and so much more. We'll cover it all here today. But of course, joining me on tonight's show, as he does each and every week, to help all of you college tennis fans get ready for the 2023 NCAA tournament, is a returning champion of returning champions here on our Cracked Racquets show, a man you know best as the founder of the No Ad, No Problem blog and podcast, our dearest friend. Welcome back to the show, co-host of these Deciding Point episodes, John J. Parsons. Jay, hey, great shot. Welcome back. You feeling that NCAA tournament juju, my friend? I won't lie. I've got a double dose of it going through my veins.
I am, and the way I know that I am is when I'm looking at Chris's site, collegetennisranks.com, and you're doing the what if calculator, and you start thinking about head-to-heads, and you're like, oh, they'll jump them. Oh, not so fast. They have the head-to-head. That has big implications for top 16. For whatever reason, when I start thinking about head-to-head in those projected rankings, that means NCAAs is around the corner.
No, absolutely. I was describing to a couple of players on various teams across the country how the math works, because literally one text I got was, Alex, you're a nerd. And I was like, good. Okay, we're on candid terms here, so I can speak bluntly about your team's chances if we're just going to establish that premise. And yeah, again, ranked wins, who you've beaten, where you end up. Have you beaten the team directly above you? If so, you get that head-to-head boost. These are, to your point, all the things you begin to start thinking about. Similarly, at this point, everyone but Cal has played about 20 matches. And so you start to think to yourself, okay, am I going to count this win? What about this win?
Yeah.
What do I need in the conference tournament to have happen? How are the seeds lining up? Do I have to get to the semifinals, or is a quarterfinal thing good enough for me? You're right. We just get to start brainstorming scenarios. We get to have fun with all of these different things. It's the home stretch of the 2023 college tennis season. While we're sad we have a little over a month left with these players, we are excited to see how these final stages all go down. And of course, again, plenty of meat on the bone as it pertains to last week's results. We'll cover it all here on today's show. We do have a little bit of a treat for all of you listeners and viewers. We have expanded our Cracked Racquets rankings this week in honor of that NCAA tournament coming ahead. We're not just going to offer you our top 10 teams. No, we're going to name the 16 teams we believe should be hosting the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. Now, again, some of it's by math, some of it's by vibes. I can't speak for how every voter in our Cracked Racquets poll goes about putting together their top 16 list, but perhaps this will be another data point for all of you college tennis fans to enjoy as, again, we prepare for the season's home stretch. With all that said, before we get rocking and rolling, got to give a major shout out to all of you college tennis fans, everyone in the college tennis community, players, coaches, fans, parents who tune in, day out, make our college tennis community such a fun place to be a part of. And obviously, again, ACC, SEC broadcasts Friday, Sunday on ESPN, SEC, ACC Network Plus. John J. Parsons made his debut on the broadcast this weekend. 2 stellar reviews. I thought you were exceptional. I thought it was. I thought we had a really. It helped that we had a really good match in Duke and NC State, right? That never hurts. That they gave us some. Again, dare I say this new. This is the new phrase, meat on the bone. I got to get it out of my vernacular here. But yeah, it's been really fun broadcasting all the action. Shout out to Perry Scheinen, of course, as well, who's been steering the ship for our Big Ten coverage each and every Sunday. If you're wanting to see who the star teams are, you want to get eyes on who, again, you need to know before the tournament begins. You can follow a lot of the college tennis action with our Cracked Racquets broadcast. Of course, a massive shout out as well to the sponsors of this deciding point, our dear friends at Tourna and Ellesse. And you see, I'm decked out. I like this Tourna shirt. It's a little Formula One, Jay. I think I have my first patch here with the Tourna on the sleeve. And obviously, everyone knows Tourna. It's synonymous with grips everywhere. You can identify it at first sight, that iconic trademark blue color, of course, a grip that works for so many tennis players, not just here in this country, but of course, around the globe. And you can check out their latest product, Tourna Tuff. It's Tourna, but better. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just their next evolution. It's only going to continue to get better from here. Again, we're so grateful to have our friends at Tourna as supporters here of this show. The least you can do, support them as well by making the choice. Once you do, you turn to Tourna Grip. You're never going to turn anywhere else. Thank you to Tourna for their support, of course. A dear shout out to our friends at Ellesse as well. You've seen the polos, you've seen the hoodies, you've seen the regular shirts. They've got an immense catalog of products that you will look good in, you will play good in. Of course, you will not regret turning to our dear friends at Ellesse for all of your tennis wearing needs, tennis clothing needs, not wearing needs. But of course, again, to learn more, click on the link in the description to this podcast. A massive thank you again to Tourna and Ellesse, proud sponsors of these deciding point episodes. With all of that said, Jay, we got, again, I would say a light load. I don't think there were too many ground shaking results from the course of the past weekend. There was one team, though, that had themselves a week. And of course, that's where we have to start today's show. And that's with NC State and all the seeding implications that come out of what they did over the course of the past weekend. And of course, we here at Cracked Racquets were fortunate enough to be able to broadcast all 3 of their matches against UNC, against Duke, against Texas. And let's be clear, this NC State team, they didn't have Diana Schneider against UNC. Obviously, it's going to be a problem to go up against UNC, even if you're fully healthy and playing your best. When you're lacking your number 1 singles and half of your number 1 doubles duo, that's an issue, particularly when you're on the road at Chapel Hill. And, while NC State fought hard, while Alana Smith and the freshman Zironova got a really good win at the 3 doubles position, it was a 6-0 set from Brantmeyer and Scotty at the number 1 double spot. And then Crawley and Tangillig doing their thing at 2 to help clinch that doubles point. You saw North Carolina earn 3 straight set victories. Carson Tangillig continuing her spectacular sophomore season. She gets a straight set win over Ren Shelley. You had a really good day at the office for Annika Yarlagadda. She gets a straight set win over Zironova. And then, look, Abby Forbes ultimately did get the job done. Forbes, it was tricky, but grinds out a straight set win for the clinch. Now, ultimately, North Carolina, on what was a rainy night, there was a long rain delay. They do ultimately come back after dropping 3 first sets in singles. They sweep everything for 7-0. That's where North Carolina State starts the weekend, right? For most teams, that might be enough. But no, they run the gauntlet again over the past week. After going to Chapel Hill, they go to Duke. They have Diana Schneider still. We'll get to Duke in a second. Their story, they play exceptional doubles. What a day for Chloe Beck, Ellie Coleman, who not only win their number 1 doubles match against Smith and Schneider, each of them earning straight set victories in singles as well. And then it was Georgia Germany, point number 3 in 3 sets to help Duke earn that 4-1 victory at the time of clinch. Now, things finish 4-3 there. But of course, what does Simon Earnshaw have in store for his team on Monday? Oh, just 2-time defending national champions, a team riding a 7-match win streak coming into the match in number 11, Texas. And, I'll tell you what, I talk all the time about getting calloused up throughout the course of the year. This NC State team, they were ready for Texas. They win the doubles point. dominant at 3, 7-5 at 1 from Schneider and Smith over, I thought, a very good Ziranova and Shavatapan team. And then the biggest storyline, North Carolina State takes 6 first sets in singles. They are in 3 straight set victories. Smith 0-2 over Ziranova. Ridiculous. Again, across the board, NC State goes 1-2 on the weekend. They retain their number 7 spot in the rankings here this week, I believe, right? Am I wrong? Or do they drop to 8?
No, I think they stayed consistent.
Yeah, I believe they stayed at 7. We talk about that. And let's just start with NC State more broadly before we get to the seeding implications. I know that was a lot there. I apologize for that rant. It was a busy weekend. You play 3 top 11 teams. You have our attention. Jay, they go 1-2. And yet, is it kind of stock up for this NC State team coming out of the weekend? Where are you with the Wolfpack? Your, I will remind everyone, preseason NCAA championship pick.
Yes, thank you for reminding everyone. I don't know if that will pay off for me in the coming weeks based on what I saw this weekend. It's interesting we start here with NC State. Obviously, they're running through the gauntlet here. You listed those 3 matches. They have Virginia coming up in ACC play. It's a brutal eight days, maybe the toughest 8 days in women's tennis that you could schedule. It's not stock up. And NC State is not the takeaway from me from any of these matches, but I'll start with NC State.
Okay,
but they certainly
that's fascinating. Explain that. What do you mean?
Well, I learned a lot more about Duke than I did about NC State, and I learned a lot more about Texas than I did about NC State. So my takeaway from this weekend where they played those 3 matches was, one, that Texas is not that good. They are not the Texas. I mean, yeah, they're an excellent team. You know what I mean? Relative, they're not the 2-time defending champion. They're not at that level yet.
They're not tier 1.
They're not tier 1. And then secondary takeaway was that the ACC is really strong. That was it. And then Duke is an elite top 4 team. The rankings show it, and they absolutely showed it this weekend.
Yeah.
Those were my takeaways. We can do team by team because I have thoughts on each of them, but I didn't take away a lot from this NC State weekend about NC State.
Well, that's fascinating to me because I think, number one, as I look at NC State, what I learned is they are that good. Like if you were, I happened to be on the broadcast for that North Carolina match. And again, North Carolina State was without Diana Schneider in that match. They were on the road. I thought they played them about as evenly as one could have asked for. Sans your number 1 player. Like, again, they won they won a bunch of first sets. I thought Rajecki played really well at the number 2 spot in taking that first set over Brantmeyer. I thought Abrams, who I believe played 4 against Forbes on the day, like, they were just trading breaks in the second set. Yes, that match was a straight set match. That match was a toss-up. That's not a guaranteed you're going to see that result when it happens again, should these 2 teams play again. Again, I'm really bummed we didn't get to see NC State play at full kilt against North Carolina because it had been a while since we'd seen the Tar Heels pushed as well. I think what I liked most about this NC State team is how they got better throughout the course of the weekend. And I really like the scheduling, big picture of Simon Earnshaw. I mean, again, he got a little lucky with the ACC schedule, having these late, but to throw Texas into the mix as well, to be able to play those 3 matches, and I think play a pretty high level in all 3. Again, even the Duke match, Moore and Smith are in a third set, and they're battling. Back beating Schneider in straight sets is a thing, but it was also an indoor thing. And you just wonder outdoors, does that change things at all in that matchup? Similarly, what is NC State going to be doing at the number 6 spot? Are they going with Ziranova? Are they going with Dittman, who's had more success of late and gets a big win over Duke? Over Duke at 6. Are they going to go with Ziranova or, again, Ernell Miller? I don't know. Like, I thought this NC State team, this was their national indoor week. Like, this was your 3 top 8 matches. Or top 16, 12 matches. Let's see how it goes. And I thought they passed. Like, were they great? No. It's an incomplete grade because you didn't have Schneider against North Carolina. Again, you would have loved to see Duke outdoors. That's my final NC State team, and then we can move on. I want you to respond to it though. It's kind of a hold for me.
Yeah, I think I would have answered your stock up, stock down. I think it's a
Yeah.
hold. Uh, I'll just say this. I was extremely unimpressed with Diana Schneider against Duke. It,
Okay.
I think, uh, was a really bad performance. And it was listless, it was lacking motivation, and it was shocking. And to do that on the heels of defeating a top 15 player in the world, I was stunned. And that really soured me on this weekend. So for me, it's a hold. I thought they looked a lot better against North Carolina than they did against Duke. And then I think Texas has now underperformed in a lot of their marquee matches, right? At Stanford, at home, NC State, Oklahoma State. So it's tough to know how much to take away. NC State is unequivocally a top 8 team, but I think they have a lot of work to do if they want to win the national title this year.
I think that's fair. I would agree. Unequivocally a top 8 team. They should host the first 3 rounds. I expect to see them at the final site. If they're clicking on all cylinders at the final site, then we'll see. But you're right. We haven't seen this team have that perfect match quite yet. And again, they've got Virginia coming up this weekend. They've still got the ACC tournament. There is a little bit of time, but that's the key word, just a little bit. But you mentioned Texas. Just give me your thoughts. Obviously, they dropped doubles. They dropped 6 first sets. This was a team that had won 7 matches in a row, had gotten good wins over Oklahoma, over Iowa State. It's still a young team, a lot of new pieces. Rivkin, Kieran, Pachkaleva. They're playing Zane in doubles. These are all new pieces to this Texas program. At the same time, you're right. Like doubles and 6 first sets was shocking.
Yeah, and not having that elite number one, I think, is starting to show itself. I think having a number one that is not winning the matches that, and even at like an 800 level is showing.
Well, so she's 9-5. I wouldn't even say 800 level. She's not freshman Peyton Stearns even either. And that, no disrespect to Nicole Kieran, who's now 9-5 overall in the year. She's been solid. You're right, but solid's probably not enough for this team to win a 3rd straight title.
It's the combination of that, plus I think coming into the season, you thought their depth at 4 through 6 was going to be
locks
on par with every other team, and on par with UNC and better than every other team in the country. That hasn't been the case. They got swept against Oklahoma State at 4 through 6, right? Like those have not been locks for them. And so you thought maybe they could make up for lacking Peyton Stearns at number 1 by being just locks at 4 through 6. And that hasn't been the case. Whether it's Pachkaleva, Rivkin, Rapalou at 4 through 6, it's been hit or miss. Zainalova is very solid for them. Shavathapan has had a better season this year. But ultimately, they just don't have the locks that they did in that lineup when they ended up winning the NCAAs in 2022.
That's exactly it. Everyone's been good. No one's been great. Like Kieran's been good. Zainalova, that was her 3rd loss of the year. She's been good. Again, in the middle of their lineup, Shavathapan and Pachkaleva, they've been solid. Rivkin's gotten a lot better, as freshmen do as the season's progressed. Is it Rapalou? Is it Zane? Who should they be playing at 6? I still think it's an open question because, to your point, no one has truly separated themselves. And you're absolutely right. This team is very good. They're not exceptional anywhere. I can't guarantee you that this is how they're going to get the first 2 points and then there's toss-ups elsewhere. They're absolutely in the mix. Did they look better than they did at the indoors? I think the freshmen did. I actually liked how Kieran Rivkin played yesterday, much better. But yeah, like this team's not top 8. Here's the thing. They're now, so we'll talk about the seeding implications. This really hurt Texas. It really hurt Stanford, who would have benefited from Texas jumping up to number 8 with a win over NC State. They don't get that. So that Texas win, not as strong as it could have been. The whole Big 12, the only big winners of the weekend were Oklahoma, because not only did they beat Oklahoma State, but that Duke win just keeps accumulating value on their resume. But like, I don't think the Big 12 should have a okay, that's not true. I really like what Iowa State's done this year. But if the to your point, if the Big 12 gets boxed out because the ACC gets 3 schools or maybe even 4 in that top 8, like I can't say it's wrong.
Yeah, but that's because I don't even know who's the best team in the Big 12 right now. Like,
Sure.
who is that team that we think would be top 8? Is it Texas, who just got smoked by Stanford, who probably might not be in top 8 seed, who gets smoked by NC State, who's right now on the tail end of that top 8? It's tough to say. So the Big 12 could get boxed out.
Yeah, and you can't say it's Oklahoma definitively, though they do have the good wins over Iowa State and Texas because again, it
Not
wasn't that long.
Texas.
No, not Texas, Iowa State and Duke, excuse me. Thank you. And Oklahoma State as well now after this past weekend. We'll get to that in a little bit, but that's enough stock down. Let's go stock up. Duke is so good.
Yeah.
And we got the chance to watch it again a lot in person throughout the course of this year as part of our ACC broadcasts. I still don't know who their best 6 singles is. Is it Bryzgalova? Is it Schvetz?
Yeah.
I feel fine no matter what choice they go with. And then again, I feel really good about their top 5. Like Ellie Coleman, Emma Jackson. I know Jackson lost this weekend, but Coleman gets the straight set victory. Both of them about 12-4, 13-5-ish. Chloe Beck's lost once throughout the course of this year. Cam Mora's playing good ball at the 2 spot. Has she earned a ton of wins? No. Is she always in a third set battling, allowing some of her other teammates who have had the exceptional years to get through the finish line? Absolutely. This team hasn't lost since the end of February, start of March, when they lost at Virginia.
Yep.
The doubles, they didn't have Mora in doubles. They still win the point, Jay.
Yeah.
I mean, we knew on paper this is what this team could look like. I would say they now do look like it.
Yeah, I doubles was the most impressive thing to me, right? Because Cam Mora and Chloe Beck have been excellent at that number 1 position. And so Cam Mora doesn't play doubles, and they still find a way to win against an NC State team who historically extremely strong in doubles, full strength NC State doubles team at that. So very impressive performance in doubles. I think it's not totally clear to me 1 through 6, and it's not always as clear. Like, for example, I feel very good about Georgia Drummy at 4 now that she seems to be playing well, seem to be healthy. I feel less good about Cam Mora at 2. Hopefully she gets healthy. She didn't play doubles. She retired at the clinch there in that match, but they're playing really well, and they have a lot of depth, and this is what you expect to see from Duke in April.
Yeah, and the sophomore surges are just real. Like Coleman and Jackson now have done it for 4 months. They have been exceptional. There's been no regression from Chloe Beck ever. Like, you're right. The doubles is really good. I still don't think Drummy's playing that well. Like, that would be my argument is I still think there's another level for this team to go. And again, when you have 2 6s, you don't have a 6. And so once they make that choice, it's been a lot of, I can't say it's been a lot of one or the other. And I think this weekend will be telling. Who do they play against North Carolina? Who has the go then? That's what I'm waiting to see. But no, stock is up for Duke. We know they've been this good all year long. They showed it this weekend, flexing their muscles, not just this one, but the 4-0 win over Wake that went pretty darn quickly as well. Last thing as it relates to this weekend, and then we'll move on. And again, not a ton of other results for us to blitz through here. That's why we're spending so long with this weekend, because I can't emphasize enough. NC State's win with North Carolina 26-0, with Duke not having lost and now up to number 3 in the country, with NC State holding top 8, with Virginia, Miami pushing as well. They have boxed out everyone. Like I can't emphasize. Can you explain that? I mean, I kind of said it there, but am I missing any details, Jay, as to why and where and what this ACC has done?
Well, so one, they're all ranked very high right now.
Yeah.
And then you look at, okay, if you're a team like a Texas, like a Stanford that is, jockeying for a top 8 position, you go, how do I break into that top 8? Well, I need to win a lot of matches. Okay. If you look at a Stanford team and the schedule that they have remaining for them, they don't have a top, 15
10.
team left on the schedule. Top 15. They don't have a top 15 team left on the schedule. How are they supposed to jump an NC State team who still has an ACC tournament? All of those ACC tournaments we just talked about, ACC schools, all have top 4 teams that they can face off, let alone top 15, top 25 teams. So it becomes extremely difficult for a team like a Stanford or a Texas to just have the points left on the schedule to break that stranglehold that these ACC teams have.
Stanford's playing Washington State round 1. North Carolina's playing Georgia Tech. Like, that's the difference in a nutshell there. Like, it starts there. And then again, as you keep going, it's like, okay, you're playing Arizona State, who's now 25. That's cute. I play Virginia, who's 13 in my quarterfinals. And then I get number 7 NC State, and then I get number 3 Duke. Like, again, it's just, it goes on. And even if you're replacing wins, the quarterfinal win in the ACC is more valuable than the championship win in the Pac-12. And again, that just to frame it for everyone. And yeah, absolutely. It's just mathematically, we know how good Stanford is. And I'm telling you right now, because the college tennis gods, not that I root for teams anymore because it doesn't matter to me, but because the college tennis gods don't like either of us, Stanford's going to Michigan in the round of 16. Just lock it in right now. I'm guaranteeing that to you, John J. Parsons. And then maybe I will finally get you to Ann Arbor. Yeah, it was massive. But again, as for all of this, final thought from the weekend, and this is not a hot take, but it just remains my take on Tuesday, April 11th. There's only one team in the country where I'm like, yeah, the doubles point doesn't really matter. And it's North Carolina. Because I'm just like, yeah, they could beat you everywhere on any given day. And their player is the favorite on every court on any given day. And like, even watching that NC State match unfold, NC State was close, but it was like, yeah, but Tangillig, Scotty roars back in a second set as well, but it's like Tangillig and Annika are protecting their leads for sure, and you have to win everything else. And it's just like, if they win doubles, they're going to win the NCAA championship, because I'm just telling you, you're not finding 4 singles victories against this team. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it looks inevitable at this point, but look, I have felt that before.
Well, I'm going to disagree. I didn't feel the same way in 21 because I thought Texas was as good. I don't think the delta between them and the rest of the field, you know what I'm going to say, is as big as it was in 2020. Like, that team I knew because I saw the national indoors where it was just like, they're killing everyone. There are too many other good teams to put this Carolina on that tier of like confidence level. But I feel so much better about this Carolina team than I did last year's. And I actually think I feel better about this group than the 21 group as well.
Yeah, I've said that before too. Relative to the field, this is the strongest North Carolina team I can remember.
Other than 20. You're wrong. Okay. I'm just saying.
The strongest thing I can remember on April 11th. We didn't even have an April 11th on 2020. So, sans that year, this is the strongest North Carolina team relative to the field that I can remember.
Okay, fair enough. It's a pleasure to watch them play too. That's all. You're just like, oh my God. Like, watching Yarlagadda, no disrespect to Ziranova, but watching Yarlagadda, you're just like, it's not the same sport right now. Like, this is a 5th year who's top 30 in the country being like, no, I got this. Don't worry. Like, everything was so measured. She was moving so well. It's very fun to watch. Again, ultimately, NC State 1 and 2, they retained their number 7 spot. It runs through the ACC. All seeding, simply put. And there are a lot of big matches coming up this weekend that we'll talk about later on in the show. But let's move on to some of the other things that happened throughout the course of the weekend. And one of the places I want to move next is out west, where things get even funkier. Obviously, we've talked all season about the up and down year for USC, the hot and cold nature of UCLA as well. The fact that, Washington coming into the weekend was really the top 16 team other than Stanford in pole position in the Pac-12, and the significance of that Stanford-Washington battle. But we also said last weekend, keep an eye on Arizona State. It's a team with a bunch of veterans that had struggled throughout the course of the year. Not struggled, but didn't have a signature victory. And they had a massive opportunity over the course of the weekend hosting USC and UCLA. Well, guess what, Jay? Let's just inject more chaos into this Pac-12 and out west, because Arizona State doesn't just beat USC 4-1. They knock off UCLA 4-2. They sweep both of the LA schools. They're now inside the top 30 of the ITA rankings. Are they the second highest ranked Pac-12 team right now, or is Washington
No,
still ahead of them? Yeah,
Washington's
Washington
still
still
ahead of
has
them.
them by a hair, but I believe they're third now, right? They jumped over
They
UCLA.
jumped the LA schools, yeah.
Yeah, Arizona State now 23, UCLA is 24, USC is 26. Does this tell you more about USC and UCLA, or does it tell you more about Arizona State, Jay? What was your takeaway from these two results?
Oh, I think it tells me more about the LA schools. But first off, I mean, congrats to ASU. Last year they sweep Stanford and Cal at home. This year they sweep USC and UCLA at home. Those are big program milestones for Arizona State. It's always exciting to see new blood mix it in there in the Pac-12 and in other conferences as well. Because it was a rough weekend for Arizona State the weekend before when they did their Bay Area trip, lose to both Cal and Stanford, neither match close. So I actually thought this was an opportunity for both USC and UCLA to get a solid road win over kind of a top 30 team. So to me, it told me more about USC and UCLA more so than Arizona State holding their ground at home.
Yeah, Arizona State dropped the doubles point against UCLA. They sweep the bottom four singles positions against the Bruins. And, again, I think Katanzarite has gotten a lot better throughout the course of this year. I think Waggle and Vagramov are starting to play a lot better as the years progressed as well. And, again, Arizona State gets a 2-0 win at 3, a 1-2 win at 4, and a 3-2 win at 6. That's pretty dominant in singles. That's a great way to respond. And I believe overall they won, 5 first sets in singles against the Bruins. As for the USC match, they win the doubles point, get straight set wins at 2, 4, and 5. No Snow Han
Yeah.
for USC in that match. And it just feels like we never see everything click for this USC team in the course of a single match. They cannot, it's just been the season from hell. I don't know how else to say it for the Trojans. And it's like the second straight year, right? Where it's just been so ups and downs and the hots and the colds. And again, I want no part of this USC team if I'm anyone in postseason play, because on the right day, you feel like they have the best player on the court in Maddie Sieg. You feel like on the right day, they might have the two best players on the court in Sieg and Cayetano, even if that hasn't been Cayetano this year. I love Charney as a piece moving forward. I even think Koenig's been really good this year as well. It's really just like the new pieces have been fine. It's Cayetano, it's Han, it's Chung.
Yep.
Between injuries and streakiness, like the veterans have not held up their part.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it perfectly when like none of those pieces have clicked at the same time. I think last season we actually saw some highs.
It was the reverse.
Yeah, here this season I actually don't think we've seen any highs. Like last season, USC started strong. They
Match
went to
point
Baylor.
Charney against Pepperdine. That was a high where it was like, oh my God, they're going to do it.
That's a low.
Yeah.
I don't know who that's a high for, but no, there have been no highs. And that has been one of the challenge. I mean, the redeeming thing is they're still a top 30 team right now, right? So it's not like they're not going to make the NCAA tournament, so they should be fine in that regard. But yeah, I mean, none of those players have been playing well at the same time or even in the lineup all at the same time. So it's been really challenging for USC. Again, ton of talent on that team, but have not been able to get everything click.
So let me ask you this. Who's the second best team in the Pac-12? Because the other results we got to talk about from the course of the weekend, Washington, who was in a pole position for top 16. They dropped two heartbreakers. They get upset 4-3 at Colorado, and credit to Coach Wynn. That's a massive win for his program. Massive moment for this Colorado team that needed it. They also get knocked off by Utah, which is never an easy place to play, but still to lose that match 4-1, to survive against BYU 4-3. You look at this Arizona State team and their resume now. They quietly 14-5 overall. They're 13-0 at home. They now have wins over the Bruins, the Trojans. Yes, they lost 4-1 at Washington. Tough losses at Cal and Stanford. Do you throw do you throw Cal in the mix in that discussion as well? As streaky as they are, we know what they're capable of. Who is the second best team in the Pac-12, Jay?
Well, first I do just want to touch on the the Utah Colorado swing for Washington.
Yeah.
We talk about in the ACC, the trip to Miami and Florida State just being brutal. The trip out to Utah and Colorado is really tough for these Pac-12 teams. I mean, just the altitude alone that you have to go play at, you have maybe one day to adjust. It's really challenging. You see a lot of teams take losses there. You've already seen several women's teams this year lose to Utah. You saw the Stanford men, lose to Utah. I felt like signs were on the wall once Washington kind of eked out that win over BYU. This might be a tough weekend, but Colorado down 3-0. They come back, win all 4 remaining matches in third sets, clinch at number 1, 8-6 in the third. What a way to kind of have such a historic win for that Colorado program. That was awesome to see. Really happy for the Colorado program there. In terms of who is the second best team, it could be Cal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's weird to say because they're hardly 500 right now. They have not been healthy. Yeah, they've played like no matches. They haven't been healthy at all this season, but they dominated Arizona State. Now that match was at home, and they might end up being the second best team. It would not surprise me to see them make the Pac-12 final. They will play Stanford in a few weeks' time, and that could tell us a lot about who's actually the second best team in the Pac-12.
The Pac-12 tournament's the most interesting tournament. I mean, the ACC is the most interesting because it's the ACC and the depth and et cetera. But it's the most uncertainty is surrounding the Pac-12 tournament. Like, I think Stanford's the best, but even Stanford throws in a 4-3 where, Blokina loses in straights and Choi has a rough day. One of my Epifanova Blake loses in 3, and all of a sudden it's 3-all coming down to one of them. And again, Stanford's gotten through in most of those situations, but like, Cal's a good call. I'm going to take Washington just because this was their first bad weekend of the year. Like, it's like everyone gets one, like except for once until we hit May. You hope that one's not in May.
Yeah.
It
was their
Washington.
First
Yeah.
road test. I mean, they've played the USC, UCLA at home. They haven't played Cal and Stanford yet. I mean, they could very well be ending the season with 4 losses in conference play.
Yeah. Again, I need to see what's going down in this Pac-12 over the course of the next few weeks. Definitely time to turn our attention out west. But yeah, we'll have time to, again, sort some things out over the course of the next weeks. Let's move over to a team that, not only got a big win themselves, but certainly was reveling in some of the results we saw elsewhere in the country, and that's Oklahoma. And the question I ask you, Jay, is simple. Is Oklahoma back? These Oklahoma Sooners now up to number 16 in the rankings. That means they're going to host the first 2 rounds of the NCAA tournament. If it were today, the key phrase there, Oklahoma now not only gets the win over Iowa State, but they followed up with a very good 4-0 win over Oklahoma State at home. Oklahoma taking the doubles points with wins at the 2 and 3 spots, which is clutch because the key, they haven't gotten a lot of wins without the Corleys, who are the number 9 team in the country, delivering at 1. To win the doubles point at 2 and 3, get straight set victories at the top 3 spots. Sleeth is heating up now that we've moved back outdoors. She gets a 2-2 win over Wolfsburg. Guzman has been excellent all year long now that she's healthy. 0-3 at the 3 spot. And then Carmen Corley's gotten better. And at 2, she gets a straight set victory. Now, most interesting, Pisareva at 4, Garcia Ruiz at 5, Staker back at the number 6 spot for this Oklahoma team. All those matches, third sets unfinished in Oklahoma's 4-0 win. Is Oklahoma back is a disingenuous question, because back would mean they're back to number 1, number 2 in the country. Like, you think they can win the whole damn thing. I don't mean that sort of capital B-A-C-K back, but they're back in the conversation, Jay. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I mean, the embers are lit. You can see them sort of like popping up a little bit, and we'll see if it turns into a fire down the home stretch. But I think some of the players that you talked about, it's good to see them playing better tennis than what they were at the start of the season. Doubles has been a strong point for them throughout the season. Look, there's a lot more pieces that are clicking. We just talked about USC pieces not clicking at the same time. It starts to feel like Oklahoma has pieces that are clicking at the same time. You have Guzman healthy and playing great. Sleeth outdoors playing well. Julia Garcia seeming to really find her form as a freshman. So there are a lot of pieces there. And they're playing better, and they seem to be playing with that fight and enthusiasm that is more emblematic of their run last year. So they are looking more like the Oklahoma from last season.
Mm-hmm. They're also a really good home team. And I think the value of hosting those first two matches at home is perhaps, I don't want to say more important for them than anyone else, but I feel pretty good Oklahoma gets through their first two matches if they are at home. Now, again, they're a dangerous road team if they do get boxed out of the top 16 as well, probably the most dangerous if they aren't in the top 16. But I know they're going to take care of business if they're at home, even if it's number 17, Florida, or number 18, whomever coming to town. Like, this team did that this weekend. Again, really good straight sets. It's hard to beat anyone in straight sets at the top three spots at all of them. And that's what they do against this Oklahoma State team who, again, got a massive win, right, to shake things up early in Big 12 play. Right now, Oklahoma State at 18. Are they out of it, Jay? Can they still fight their way back to a top 16 seed?
I mean, if they win the Big 12, certainly, right?
Sure.
I mean, if they get
Big 12
wins
tournament.
over Big 12 tournament, exactly. Yeah, the Oklahoma State lineup is sort of confusing to me. They pulled Novak at number 1 against Oklahoma. I'm not sure, like, the singles order is strange. It won them depth against Texas, but they couldn't pull out the same recipe against Oklahoma. I don't really know what to make of this team. We're seeing Zarulo back in the lineup. She's been out, injured. Look, if they win out, I think they're a top 16 team. Do I think they are a top 16 team? No.
Yeah. I agree resume wise. I don't have them in my top 16. I still just don't know how good this team is. And it's April 11th. And again, I think they're really solid. I think they can find 3 singles victories against a bunch of teams. Haven't seen them dig back to find 4 when they've needed to. And I just don't know, what are your locks? What are your strongest points? Again, they've been pretty good everywhere. They're usually pretty strong at that 4 and 5 position, right? Rojas started the year hot and just
Miyamoto has been excellent. I'm stunned she's still at 4 or 5.
Well, that's the thing is that's probably the one spot, right? That's where they've been really good at those 4 and 5 spots. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough team. They're a tough out. Would it shock me if they go on the road and beat a 13th seeded Auburn, at Auburn? No, not at all. I can tell you now, if that's the match, it's going to be 4-3. That's just how Auburn rolls. I'm keeping my eye on Oklahoma State. And I suppose speaking of Auburn, that's how we can transition to our next topic here. And again, not too much more for us to run through. I do want to get to some other results that had NCAA implications and we can rapid fire through them. But speaking of that theme, how about Arkansas? An Arkansas team we have not spent enough time talking about. And, head coach Christina Sanchez-Quintanar steps away from the team about a month ago. That was news I hadn't even heard of until earlier. What was it? When I was calling the Arkansas match on Friday night, and you, me, and, Chris were texting about that. And, again, for this Arkansas team to lose your head coach at the start of March, they've been flirting with 500 just about all year long. They had to win out. They had to beat Auburn at home this weekend to earn a shot at getting back inside the top 50. And then they had to follow that up with a really good home win against Alabama on Sunday. They do exactly that. They didn't just beat Auburn, Jay. They gave Auburn the business. The doubles point was extraordinarily close. I will give Arkansas and Auburn credit there. It came down to 2 tiebreakers at 1 and 3. It was really fun. Both breakers going the way of Arkansas. After that, Arkansas took 4 first sets in singles, Jay. They earned 2 straight set victories from Kelly Keller, from Morgan Cross. And then, credit to freshman Carolina Gomez-Alonso, who is probably the freshman we have spent the least amount of time talking about that we should. Top 50 in the country, has lost fewer than 5 dual matches this season. She has been exceptional. Arkansas, with their 2 wins, Jay, you look at today's edition of the ITA team rankings, they have climbed their way up to number 40. They're in the hunt. Massive weekend for the Razorbacks.
Yeah, a huge weekend. And I think they've sort of underperformed most of this season. I remember seeing them earlier this year, and you mentioned Carolina Gomez. I mean, she's had an outstanding fall as a freshman, and she's been so solid for them. And she's not even playing number one, right? So they have depth. They have
And let me
Casey
just say,
Harvey.
Keller's good too. Like Keller should be at one. It's
Yeah.
like as good as Gomez Alonso has been. I have no problem with it.
No, me neither. And I use it
Yeah.
to illustrate that they have a ton of talent. She's a top 50 player, and she's, they're ranked 40, and she's not at number one for them. So they
How
have
about
talent on this team.
Spink's good too.
Spink's good. They have Casey Harvey, the transfer from North Carolina, who doesn't even always play at 6.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of talent. I do think that earlier in the season, I was expecting more from them. So this was good to see them get that win. We should say Auburn was without freshman DJ Bennett. I didn't think that would cause this match to go the way it did, but it did. And it's a great win for Arkansas. It helps, bolster their resume into the NCAA hunt now. And now they sort of control their own destiny, right? If they avoid any losses that they shouldn't lose, if they could get a win in the SEC tournament, they're in.
Yeah.
So a really strong weekend for them, and the win against Alabama as well.
Yeah, perfectly put. On the Auburn note, I mean, this is just their season. I think I did the math. It's like they've played 7 4-3 matches or something. And I was looking at it. Arkansas, who was 500, had yet to lose a match 4-0. Now, sometimes matches are played beyond the clinch, and there might have been something 4-0 at clinch, but I was looking through Auburn's resume. I'm pretty sure they don't have a single 4-0 victory. If they do, they have maybe one 4-0 victory this year, Jay. Like, this is just what they do. And maybe it'll be a blessing for them come the NCAA tournament. Maybe they'll play a bunch of close matches. That's a lie, by the way. They beat Samford 7-0 on January 22nd. They beat University of Alabama Birmingham 7-0. And then 4-0 Missouri, I suppose, this Sunday. So there you go. 3, the most recent coming of late. They just play close matches. That's what they do. Again, before this Missouri match, every conference match had been a close 4-1, a close 4-2, going down to the thriller. Again, it's fun. Like, I like their freshmen, Okotoye. I like Bennett. I like Carnicella.
Yeah.
I like Flack. I like Ansari. I like Arsenault. I like all 6 pieces individually. I just don't know where they all belong still. And it's April 11th. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but like this Auburn team's they're rock solid.
Well, I think they belong in the positions that they are in, at least the tiers of those positions, right? To have your more veteran players in the top 2.
You're right. I guess I don't know their biggest strengths still.
Yeah, well, I think that's the concern, right? Is that like any team feels like they can win against any single one of those players at any single position. And Auburn feels the same, right? Like we have a 50-50 shot at all of these positions. They have been strong in doubles for a few of their key matches, but yeah, I mean, this is tough because the margins are so thin. When you pull out, it's like a Jenga piece, right? With DJ Bennett coming out of that lineup, and you move everyone up, and you're like, the margins were already so thin. Things turn out like this against Arkansas. So hopefully DJ Bennett is back healthy for Auburn during this home stretch, because she's clearly a very big piece for them.
Yeah, well said. Well, with this Auburn loss, who's clinched sole possession of 3rd place and should finish there as long as there's no disasters against Mississippi or Mississippi State this weekend. Tennessee, who, in my opinion, probably put the bow on their top 16 case this past weekend. Tennessee 4-1 win over South Carolina. They also get an impressive 4-1 win where it was really like the first hour they played against Florida this weekend on Friday was magnificent. I mean, they won the doubles point in about 23 minutes. And then when I say, Anzalota, Adeshina, Kutzer, ran away with their first sets at 3, 5, and 6. Of course, Tennessee goes on to take 5 of 6 first sets against Florida. Now, the big disclaimer, it was indoors. This Florida team is not an indoor team. That's very, very clear just by watching them play. Still, 4-1 over Florida, 4-1 over South Carolina. Their only 2 conference losses are to Texas A&M and Georgia. I think they have 4 losses overall on the year. One of them at Ohio State, the other one at NC State. The first Diana Schneider match we saw. This team is top 16 good. I don't know. I know we've been selling it for a couple of weeks, so we'll stop there because we've talked about their depth, their strength, etc. But they have the resume now, Jay.
Yeah, and that's a huge win for them over Florida, just the
Yeah,
second in program history, which is wild. They've been excellent. I mean, it was
that
it
is
was
wild.
yeah, right? And they're like 2-49 now or
Yeah.
something like that. But it was also fun to see, Rebecca Mertena, Daria Kutzer honored, who have been just such fixtures in this lineup for them over the years. They've kind of ascended to the top spots in the top three there. They've had such a big impact on this program to kind of get that, you use the word get that bow win over kind of Florida, I think feels really good for them. And they should be carrying a lot of confidence heading down into the home stretch because they have been excellent this season and they're another team that you do not want to play down the home stretch.
I'll tell you what, they're in my top 16. I imagine they're in yours as well. Before we get to that unveiling of our top 16, let's talk about some of the other results we saw throughout the course of the weekend. And again, some of these results, NCAA implications, there's a long list of them on the board here. So, Jay, you don't have to comment on all of them. I guess just put the finger up when you want me to stop, just because, again, a lot of these matches have NCAA implications. So, again, want to list through them here quickly. Georgia, the other half of that Tennessee travel partner, they get 4-1 victories over Florida. South Carolina, they're going to be top 8, no doubt about it. The only question, again, where does Anya Hurdle play in the singles lineup? If she's healthy, what are they going to do in doubles? 2 NCAA tournament valuable wins. With the ups and downs of Andy, you just never know what you're going to get. They get a 5-2 win over Kentucky. LSU 5-2 win over Ole Miss, which they had to have to keep their NCAA tournament hopes alive. That's everything else we saw out of the SEC, out of the Big Ten. Ohio State 4-0s over Iowa, Nebraska. Michigan 4 over Purdue. Collision course this weekend. Top 8 seed on the line. Big Ten title on the line. We're all looking forward to it. That said, shout out Illinois. They've clinched their NCAA tournament berth, in my opinion. Much needed 4-3 win over a frisky Maryland team. Iowa 4-3 over Penn State. That win that much more valuable as Penn State gets a 4-2 win over a top 75 Nebraska team. Any Big Ten thoughts, Jay? I know we haven't talked much about them of late here on this show.
Well, when we talk about seeding implications, that Michigan-Ohio State match, there are a lot of implications. You talk about getting boxed out. It's very possible that the loser of that match gets boxed out of the top 8, particularly if they lose again in the Big Ten tournament. So that one is going to be very interesting.
Michigan more protected than Ohio State because Michigan's already beaten Ohio State, which they did at the National Indoor Tournament. But absolutely, that match, all sorts of stakes beyond just the fact that it's another rivalry battle. You look at the ACC results. UNC Duke 4-0 sweeps over Wake Forest. Miami 5-2 over Notre Dame. Florida State 4-1 over Notre Dame. Notre Dame, which has been a top 30 team all year long. Again, tough South Florida or Florida in general stretch. Florida State, a different team with Vic Allen back in the lineup at the number 1 spot, just adding to that impressive depth you see in the ACC. And speaking of which, Georgia Tech, good 5-2 road win over Clemson. Any additional ACC thoughts, Jay?
Well, we were on the call for that Georgia Tech Clemson match. That was much closer than 5-2. I mean, for a very long time, you had no idea which direction that match was going to go. It was a good win for Georgia Tech to pull it out.
Yeah, Pac-12, Stanford 6-1 over San Diego, 4-0 over Oregon. I mean, we'll get to your ranking, so I suppose we'll see if this team is top 10 good in our Cracked Racquets minds, even if the rankings may not reflect it. Other Big 12 results, Kansas, TCU, big wins over Kansas State, Texas Tech 4-3 respectively. Baylor 4-1 over
I have to chime in on the Kansas State. This was a wild match.
Yeah,
Kansas State I don't even know if they were ranked prior to this match. They were definitely outside the top 100. They didn't even have 6 players in this match. They only had 5 players, and it came down to a final set, 7-5 in the third. Kansas squeaked out the victory. I was very surprised watching this match, but very good for other Big 12 teams who are hoping to, take on Kansas, for them not to take that loss, but just heartbreaking for Kansas State not to be able to get that, which I'm sure would be a very big coup for the program this year and what has otherwise been a really tough year.
Yeah, perfect. Well, then again, SMU knocking out Rice. Denver, a much needed win over Tulsa. They're right on the tournament bubble. And same with San Diego State, who gets a big 4-2 win over Colorado State. That's everything that's happened over the course of the past weekend. With all of that in mind, Jay, it's time to unveil for the first time our Cracked Racquets top 16 again, with the NCAA tournament looming. Top 16 seeds host the first 2 rounds of NCAA tournament play. Top 8 seeds hosting the first 3 rounds. Here's who we have as our top 8. North Carolina 1, A&M 2, Duke 3, Pepperdine 4, Georgia 5, NC State 6, Michigan 7, Stanford 8. That's according to our vibes. Now, for what it's worth, you look at the computer. Jay, I know who you forgot. You mentioned before. Sorry, in your poll. Yeah,
Way to expose me.
Yeah,
on
I
this
know
one.
exactly who you forgot in your poll, Jay. But again, just to compare that to the computer rankings, our top 8, including Stanford, the top 8 right now of the computer rankings: North Carolina, A&M, Duke, Georgia, Pepperdine, Michigan, Ohio State, and NC State. Let's just start with that top 8 first, Jay, and let's start with our top 8. Your thoughts on where things currently stand?
I think these are the right top 8. I will say that. I think that these are deservedly the top 8 teams in the country right now. And I don't really have an issue with the order at all, with the exception of I think Stanford would beat Michigan on a neutral court right now.
Yeah.
But other than that, I feel really good about this.
So Iowa State, Texas, and Stanford are all my 8, 9, and 10 as well. I have Iowa State 8, Stanford 9, Texas 10. Now, I know Iowa State lost to Texas in Austin, but let's remember Iowa State beat Texas at neutral territory. And I went through the resumes, and Iowa State's wins are just better. Like wins over Miami. I know the Vanderbilt win is devalued, but just like simply put, Iowa State has a better resume right now than Texas, has a better resume than Stanford as well. I gave Stanford over Texas, obviously, because Stanford won the head-to-head duel. But by vibes, I had Stanford 7 in that Michigan spot. And I was like, no, come on, try to keep it somewhat accurate. Yeah, that would be my only complaint. I mean, I think this is my top 7, other than I have NC State and Georgia switched based purely on vibes. All right, I'm going to be fully honest here, Jake. Did I include my rankings to you? Did I send them to you? I think I did accidentally.
Yes.
I have Duke at 2. Like,
yeah.
I'm just ready to go there. Are you?
No.
Okay. It's fair. I have A&M at 3, and I'd put them in the same tier of like the next 2 most dangerous teams, equally dangerous. If A&M had Branstein, they'd be a tier above Duke. It's the lack of Branstein that puts Duke on that same tier. And again, we'll get to see them play out this weekend. Now, maybe the big thing for college tennis fans, they note, again, I haven't talked about it, are 9 through 16. Here are the other teams we have hosting. We have Texas 9, Iowa State 10, Ohio State 11, Miami 12, Virginia 13, Tennessee 14, Oklahoma 15, Auburn 16. I don't think we're missing. I think our top 16 is in a different order, but the exact same top 16 teams as the rankings, Jay. Any qualms? Any disagreements?
No, these are probably the next 8. Mm-hmm. The only team that I feel like deserves to be in here and I think would beat some of these teams on a neutral court is Florida.
Mm-hmm. I think they're the tough leave. Now, again, Florida, Auburn, like,
but that's the thing. I would feel like leaving out Auburn is less tough.
Yeah. And look, they play this weekend. That's top 16
there you go.
On the line. Yeah. And so we will see. I agree. That was my last cut. I think I had forgotten about Miami when I was doing my list. And then I was like, who's the 16th team? And I was like, oh, duh, Miami. Like, don't forget about them. And I did kind of put them like, I don't know. Look, it's a huge match. Ohio State, for what it's worth, is 14th on my list, which was crazy to say. And I literally went resume for resume between them and Tennessee. And I was like, and I know they straight up beat Tennessee, so head to head, that's wrong. So I ultimately flipped it, and Ohio State's 13 and Tennessee's 14, just to stay consistent with the ITA rules. But that was another one of those things I had initially, just because I think Tennessee's been tested in a way Ohio State really hasn't been over the course of the past month. No discredit to Ohio State. That's just the way conference play works. My next out are Florida, Georgia Tech, Oklahoma State, and Washington by vibes and ranking. And I think that's exactly who's next on the rankings right now as well. So hot take, Alex. Any final thoughts before we look at the week ahead?
No, the hard part about Ohio State is we really haven't seen them tested since. It feels like we haven't seen them tested since they got eviscerated by Texas A&M at indoors.
Do you want to admit? Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
And so it's just because I feel like Miami right now would beat Ohio State outdoors. A lot of these teams below them, I think, would beat Ohio State outdoors. That one is the really tricky one. I hope that Ohio State Michigan matches outdoors like the men were this past weekend.
You want to admit who you forgot in your top 16?
I'll let the viewers guess.
I'll let the viewers guess. I like that as well. Well, then with all of that said, let's look at the week ahead because we have 3 matches. Clear the schedule. Whatever you're doing this weekend, you change it and you make time to watch these 3 matches. Let's start with the big one. April 14th in Chapel Hill, Duke at North Carolina, both top 4 schools now. Again, ACC regular season title on the line. Let's not forget Duke ended North Carolina's undefeated conference run last year. It was their first conference loss since 2019, just their 4th conference loss since 2015. I mean, let's go. Let's go. That match is exceptional. Guess what happened simultaneously, 3 p.m. Eastern time on Friday? UVA at NC State. If you think we're not double boxing it up with those 2 matches on our screen, you are sadly mistaken. We will have coverage of those 2. First ball to last. Those are your tier 1 battles. Obviously, you throw Ohio State at Michigan right there as well. Now, you hope that match is indoors for viewing purposes because there are no cameras outdoors, but you hope that match is outdoors for competitive purposes.
I thought that was going to change this year. I thought I heard people were upset last year, NCAA's not on camera. I'm waiting for the change. Who do you have to call? Who do you have to call?
All I have to say is it's not who I have to call. That's those calls have been made, and the people on the other end on the line, they get it. They're not we need Cracked Racquets to make it big, and then I'll donate the money for the cameras, and then it's not an issue.
It's because they didn't win the football this year, and all the money for it.
Just because you brought that up, I was talking to my little brother, and I was like, let me ask you this. Michigan men make the semifinal, but they lose to TCU again. Can you handle it? And he was like, yeah, I can handle it. And it was just like, oh, okay, cool. Okay. I was like, I agree. I think you could handle it. Yeah, those are the 3 tier 1s. You want to give me picks? Duke at UNC?
North Carolina.
UVA at NC State.
NC State.
Ohio State at Michigan. Say it. Say it.
I have to go Michigan.
Oh, okay. The 3 home teams. Yeah, that's what I would do as well. All right, tier 2s. You tell me what's most interesting of these these road trip homes, whatever. Washington at Stanford and Cal, South Carolina, Florida at Auburn, Florida State, Miami at Georgia Tech, or Oklahoma State, Oklahoma at Kansas. You can only pick one of those double headers those 2 sums to watch. What do you pick? 3 sums.
I would actually go Big 12 in this sense because all 3 of those teams are hovering around the 16 to 20 range, right? So that has massive implications for top 16.
Yeah, Oklahoma gets a win over Kansas. They're feeling very good about their prospects heading into the Big 12 tournament. I go South Carolina, Florida. No, I go Washington at Stanford and Cal because I'm just shrugging. I don't know how any of those matches are going to go. And so that's the most intriguing to me. Tennis-wise, South Carolina, Florida at Auburn, because you just know those matches are going to be 4-3. That's just what Auburn and South Carolina do. And there are a lot of hey, we want to finish 4th in the SEC implications between these 3 teams. Who is the 4th best team? Let's find out throughout the course of the weekend. You've also got Pepperdine at UCLA, A&M at Vandy, sneaky important Illinois at Wisconsin. I think that's a fun one. And then UVA, of course, at Wake as well. Any other matches, Jay, you'd point to throughout the course of the weekend? Any final thoughts before we wrap today's show?
No, I think we had a really good slate on our hands coming up.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be a jam-packed weekend. And of course, we here at Cracked Racquets so excited to be able to broadcast so much of it Thursday, Sunday on ESPN, ACC Network Plus. We'll have our ACC cross-court cast. We'll have the SEC on Friday, the Big Ten Sunday on our Cracked Racquets YouTube channel, of course, as well. So much fantastic college tennis action as the 2023 season officially enters its home stretch, of course. A massive thank you to all of you who tune in to these episodes day in, day out, week in, week out, making this college tennis world such a fun place to be a part of course. A massive thank you to our friends at Ellesse as well for their support of this show. You guys know, to learn more about their expansive catalog, just click on the link in the description to this podcast. Of course, a massive thank you as well to our dear friends at Tourna. You see them decking me out in this iconic trademarked blue shirt. That's the same color you'll see in their new Tourna Tuff grip. Again, a more durable version of Tourna Grip. It's just the updated version. It's Tourna 2.0, Tourna 3.0, probably Tourna 17.0, given how long they've been dominating the business. A massive thank you to our friends at Tourna as well. With all of that said, again, we will be back tomorrow night here on our Cracked Racquets YouTube channel to recap all of the Division I men's action. Jay, do you have any men's takes you've been hovering in your brain? I know you offer them on No Ad, No Problem, but anything you'd like to add here as well?
Stock down on Michigan. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on that match. I don't know. Maybe I'll get the invite eventually, and I can share full thoughts on men's. But it's been a very interesting season.
Yeah, well, here's what I'll say. If I were doing a podcast previewing Michigan versus Ohio State men, I would want the foremost expert on those two schools, dare I say, in the world. And I'm pretty sure that foremost expert was not invited to the No Ad, No Problem blog.
Well, it was a podcast.
A podcast, excuse me.
And we try and stay objective. So they might be foremost expert, but we got to keep it unbiased on the No Ad, No Problem podcast.
First of all, for you of all people to accuse me of bias in that matchup, the particular dagger. I want you to know, I'm not going to name the players, but there's a group chat between myself and some members of the Ohio State team. It's very like they're going to say release the chat when I get accused of bias from here on in, because no one values Ty Tucker's program and what it's meant to men's college tennis over the past 2 decades.
To be clear,
I do.
You're superstitious and biased against Michigan, so I can't have you on the pod.
Okay. I accept that. That is acceptable, and that is a perfect
I can't
place.
You have just like tanking the Michigan side of stuff. Not acceptable.
Okay. Fair. And that's where we're going to leave today's show. With all that said, again, a massive thank you to John J. Parsons, without whom these shows would be impossible. A shout out, of course, as always, to our super producer, Daniel Westoff, as well. Heck of a job editing these shows day in, day out. With all that said, for the fantastic John J. Parsons, our super producer, Daniel Westoff, our friends at Ellesse and Tourna, and from all of us here at both Cracked Racquets and the Tennis Channel Podcast Network, I'm your host, Alex Gruskin. Jay, what do we tell our listeners?
Hey, great shot.
And we will see you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.